So this is a quick note before I get into the video. Originally, this was supposed to be one long video, but I've decided to split it up into 2 parts. What you're watching now is part 1. The next video will be part 2. So when you're done with this video, make sure to go and watch the second one. Final thing I'll say is that these videos focus heavily on my experience with what is commonly referred to as a psychotic break, and how that break brought me to a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder. These videos are extremely raw, and at times I do discuss trauma caused by my psychosis, specifically around themes of religion. So watch at your own discretion. Anyways, without further ado, this is the story about how I got diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. So this is actually going to be a really hard video for me to film. I will make it through. I mean, if it's posted, then I made it through. But I'm going to talk about how I got diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. And the thing is that I've made videos talking about how I got cyclothymia, which transitioned into bipolar 2. But there's differences between those mood disorders and schizoaffective disorder, which is what I'm actually diagnosed with now. Which means that I experience symptoms of schizophrenia, such as delusions and hallucinations, but also symptoms of a mood disorder, such as bipolar or major depression. And I've really been putting this off for quite some time now, even though that stuff like what I'm going to talk about in this video is the whole reason I made SchizoKitzo. But I need to get my story out there, the whole story. And so this video, I'm just going to be talking about what brought me to the diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder. It's not pretty. It was actually really traumatic when it happened. I'll get to that, but yeah. Oh my God. Okay, here we go. So schizoaffective disorder for me is like having all of bipolar 1 disorder with a side of schizophrenia symptoms. Mainly, I hear voices. But due to the similarities that schizoaffective disorder has when compared to schizophrenia and bipolar, sometimes it's hard to get that schizoaffective diagnosis. And that's kind of what happened to me. And add in the fact that many in the psychiatric community don't even think that schizoaffective disorder exists, well, you can see why it would take so long to get a diagnosis. Anyway, on with the story. Strap in your seatbelts. So crap really started to hit the fan for me about 4 years ago in 2018. Technically, the stuff I'm going to discuss in this video began in 2017, but 2018 is where things got more serious. You could say that it was when it got real. 2018 was when I had the worst episode of my entire life, and that's what I'm going to tell you about. So to start, in terms of my disorder, people leaving me is one of my biggest triggers. I don't have a fear of abandonment per se. Like, I don't live my life worried that people around me are going to leave, but when people actually do leave, it triggers me and worsens my condition to the point where it sometimes sets off entire episodes. God, how do I even say this? I was head over heels in love with this girl, and it was unrequited because she was also aromantic and asexual, meaning she didn't experience romantic or sexual attraction to anybody. So I knew that there wasn't a future there, but I was happy being her friend. She never knew I had feelings for her, and I never planned on telling her. And the thing is, no one really knew I was in love with her. And actually, it's kind of funny that a lot of people in my real life also don't know I was in love with her. So me making a video and talking about it is kind of, that's an interesting dichotomy, I'll put it that way. But there were some events that led to a downhill slope in our relationship, and she ended up ghosting me. Now, around the time of this breakup per se, I had just arrived in New York City to sublease my friend's apartment in Brooklyn. It was an absolutely wonderful opportunity. New York City is my favorite place in the entire world, and having just graduated college, getting away, like far away from my university, well, that sounds like a great idea. So I packed up my stuff and I went. But losing that girl sent me headfirst into an episode, and like with all of my episodes, the mania hit first. Now, in the past, I'd had hypomanic episodes, meaning much milder than the full mania I'm talking about here. And the big difference between hypomania and mania is that hypomania doesn't necessarily disrupt your life too much, while mania destroys everything it touches. And that's what happened to me. 2 weeks later, I ended up in Japan. I'm from the States, so that's the other side of the world. It was very much a spur-of-the-moment trip that I used to get even farther away from my problems. Now, it was great, don't get me wrong, but it was very unplanned and chaotic. I spent a lot of money, I didn't get into any trouble, and honestly, it was just a wild time. But I remember being on the long 15-hour plane ride over there, thinking, what on earth was I doing? Like, gotten on this plane to go to the other side of the world, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? And immediately my brain supplied to get away from her. And the thing is, mania is this weird no consequences state. And I'm not just talking about bad consequences, I'm talking about good ones too. When you're manic, you don't think about the future or what could happen to you. Everything is just what you want in the moment. And this is why mania is so dangerous. Whew. Okay, here we go. So I've mentioned this on the channel before, but up until this episode, the only psychosis I'd really been dealing with was basically hearing voices. So I have these repeat offenders, I guess you could say, my peanut gallery, my headmates, my friends, for lack of a better term. But in 2017 and then also 2018, I started having something called a religious delusion. And I cannot believe I just said that to a camera. And my delusion began as just this feeling that God had chosen me for a very particular and important purpose. And you'd think, well, that just sounds like normal religion, normal Christianity, for lack of a better term. And yes, it does. And that's why it was under the radar for so long, but I'll get to what actually happened and how that shifted and changed. So I basically just chalked it up to being a good Christian, basically. I mean, the people around me at church, there were some that were actually jealous of my connection to who we all believed was God. And the thing is, I was very happy where things were. Things were great. I was very devout. I was going to church. I was experiencing this wonderful, happy feeling of being welcome and comforted and chosen and all that. I mean, I didn't think anything was wrong. Dare I say it was safe at that point. However, in 2018, this thing that I had worshipped started talking to me. And that thing that I was worshiping told me that people very close to me that I cared quite a lot about were going to die. And the thing is that since it was a delusion, I believed it. I believed it with every cell in my body. And the thing is, I truly believed that this God I worshipped had chosen me over everyone else to know someone I loved was going to die, watch it happen, and endure it, all for a purpose I would never know. And that sounds pretty messed up, right? It got worse. So I get back from my sudden trip to Japan and get the opportunity to actually move into the apartment I was subleasing. And me, living in New York City, my favorite place in the entire world, like, of course I took that opportunity. And so in September of 2018, I moved to New York City. And within a few weeks of moving in, things got into psychotic break territory. Part of this was because I was alone and kind of isolated in a new city. I just had several major life events, like losing my friend, graduating college, and moving. And in terms of my episodes, major life events are triggers. And I was very, very far away from my support system. So the room that was going to be witness to all the events I'm about to tell you was painted Tiffany blue, had white trim, and was about the size of a parking space. The bipolar side of my disorder had transitioned into a mixed state, meaning that I was experiencing the highs of life-ruining mania while also experiencing the deep lows of depression at the same time. And the thing is, my head started screaming at me 24/7. And this wasn't like the voices I'd been hearing since the 8th grade. This was like being in a crowded subway tunnel where everyone is yelling at the top of their lungs. And while I could not audibly hear it, my brain was reacting as if I was being yelled at constantly. Growing up, this would happen every now and then, and I called it the noise. And everywhere I went, the noise followed me. It was always present. It would never shut up. I would wake up, it would be there, I'd go to sleep. And the only thing that would really make it go away was having a drink or 2 or 3 or 4. And on top of that, I self-harmed every day, usually multiple times a day. I was not coping well. So with that in mind, while everything I'm about to tell you was happening, I still had to deal with the voices in my head that I've been hearing since the 8th grade, the awful noise, the weird death premonition thingies, and my moods giving me emotional whiplash. And here's where we get into even more heavy stuff. And if you stuck with me this long, thank you so much. Just hang in there a little bit longer. So as time passed, this delusion and these hallucinations were getting harder and harder to ignore. And that God, the one I worshipped, the one that told me people I cared about were gonna die, well, he started getting angry at every single thing I did. And it wasn't long before all I felt was fear and terror because I realized I couldn't do anything right in his eyes. Like, for example, he would be angry at me when I self-harmed because I was hurting something that didn't belong to me. And it was starting to get to the point where maybe this wasn't really the Christian God that I'd been led to believe it was. Instead, I started to believe that it was some other higher power that had chosen me, that I was special above everybody else. So there was this, I don't know, not lesser deity, greater deity, but it was a deity. I believed it firmly to be a deity that had, yes, chosen me over everyone else because I was special and all that stuff. I was a special snowflake, and I really bought into it because, of course, it was a delusion. You That's the thing about delusions, is you believe them. And as a result, I firmly believed I had no choice in who I was to answer to.